This is not something I've ever shared publicly before, but if you feel like no matter how hard you train or how much you achieve, you still feel like there's this version of yourself that you can't live up to, then I'm making this video for you. So 5 years ago, I woke up behind a bus stop in Croatia in one of the lowest points of my life. I'd left on this big one-way trip to find myself. You know, as many young people do who don't know their place in the world. And that kind of whirlwind experience had so many things to offer. I moved to Sri Lanka to run a hostel in the middle of the jungle with some crazy local dude I'd known for 2 weeks. I learned a new language in 2 months to better deal with the local mafia and politics on the island. We threw an illegal party to make enough money to get the loan sharks off our backs so the hostel didn't go out of business. After a truly reckless amount of substances and sex and just stories with people who are incredible and I'll never forget, a whole year had gone by, but still no sign of my purpose or the big thing I wanted to do in life. I left Sri Lanka at the end of the tourist season with high hopes of going and working on super yachts and making lots of money and coming back the next season with, you know, just my bank account full. And after a train wreck set of circumstances, I found myself in Spain with no job, next to no qualification on a super yacht, next to no money, and having to choose between eating food and sleeping inside. And I chose food. So I used what little money I had to invest in a 30 € sleeping bag, a 5 € shitty little thin sleeping mat from Decathlon, and a cracked up 40 € guitar. And I decided I was gonna go hitchhiking to the south of Spain where it was meant to be cheaper and busk along the way to try and make some money back so I could keep eating food. And I was sure that by the time I got to the south and it would be cheaper, I would have, you know, learned all of this stuff about myself through this experience hitchhiking and sleeping out, you know, outside to save money, and I'd know much more about my purpose and the direction that I was really seeking at that time. What actually happened was I spent the next month and a half in some of the roughest conditions of my entire life. I was hitchhiking in a country that I now know no one hitchhikes in. I looked up all the forums afterwards and they were all like, don't go hitchhiking in Spain, people don't trust people waiting on the side of the road, you'll wait forever. And I now know that's true. I was sleeping in the street 5-6 nights a week to save money and only getting a hostel bed once every week or so when I just couldn't take it anymore. I had a 5 € budget every meal to try and get some shitty little come on and bread to find somewhere. And my daily ritual looked something like this. Wake up in the morning in some patch of dirt or some roadside spot and go and find some public bathroom, look around for some cafe or some public bathroom where I could take a little shower in the sink. I'd buy a coffee and tortilla to charge my phone on my laptop, or I'd do some work on my laptop. I was building a website for one of the surf camps back in Sri Lanka, and I'd plan my route for the day. I'd find a spot on a map where I was like, yeah, maybe I can get picked up there, and I'd walk between 30 minutes to 2 hours to try and find a spot where I was likely to get a ride to the day further south. And then I'd wait in the sun on the side of the road for anywhere between 10 minutes to 8 hours. And if I got picked up, I'd go and find a spot in the next city to go see where I was likely to be able to sleep. And if I didn't find a spot, I'd go back to the same spot that I slept the previous night and go to sleep and do it all again the next day. I wound up after about a month and a half of this buying a dirt cheap flight to Croatia to avoid my Schengen visa running out. And I was counting on this $500 that was meant to be coming in for this online website work that I was doing. And I'd stayed in one hostel. I was trying to volunteer there, so I would sleep inside, but they didn't have any spots. But I met some people and I made some, you know, a few coins busking. So I bought a bottle of the local spirit rakia to share it with the people I'd met at the hostel and go out drinking with them, which is a fucking awesome idea when you can barely afford to sleep inside or eat. And while I was out drinking, I realized that the $500 that was coming in got paid, but it got paid into my PayPal account. And I couldn't access my PayPal account because I didn't have my Australian SIM to verify it. So just like that, no more access to money, no more funds, time's up. So with nothing left in the bank, with the Swedish girl that I was trying along with that night, gone home with somebody else. I, kind of drunk, went to pick up my bag and walked out into the street at about 2 o'clock in the morning to find somewhere to sleep. And even though I was used to sleeping rough by this time, this was truly a low moment for me, because this was the first time that I could actually officially not even afford to stay inside in a bed, even if I wanted to. It wasn't a strategic thing anymore. I was properly out in the street. And on that night, I really fucking wanted to stay inside. Now, you might be asking, why the fuck didn't you just borrow some money? Or why didn't you go home so much sooner than this? You know, like what are you doing? And, you know, the answer to that is kind of more complicated than it would seem on the surface. You know, I could have, but like many young men in the world, like not knowing my place in the world was more than just a little bit confusing for me. May 13th, 2016 is still an anniversary I celebrate every single year. It's in my calendar, I've got a reminder that comes up. And it's the day, 3 years earlier, the time I'm talking about, it was the day that I chose not to take my own life. I narrowly avoided doing that. And if you'd asked me, if anyone had known back then and had asked me why, I wouldn't have told them that I was sad. I would have just told them that I had no logical reason to live. And I would have just shrugged it off and tried to pretend that that wasn't something that made me feel inside this quiet, desperate form of apathy that would follow me around every waking moment of every day. And so that's what I felt, that if I didn't find this purpose, this thing that I was looking for overseas, that's the life I thought I was going back to. And so I have the best friends in the world, but the only thing that was more painful than this life in the street that I'd essentially, you know, made for myself was the thought of going back to Australia to a life with no reason to get up in the morning. What's more, I had not told a single soul what I was going through or even where I was. None of my friends knew, none of my family knew what I was going through. And the reality is I was too ashamed to tell them. I wanted so badly to believe that I was gonna, you know, be this person that could travel around the world and have this great life and, you know, work on my laptop, and I didn't want to tell anybody. So instead of borrowing money or asking for help, I chose that dirt behind the bus stop in Split, Croatia, because I knew from experience that dirt is more comfortable than concrete. I woke up about 3 hours later to find a bunch of people standing at that bus stop going to work and looking over their shoulder at me, kind of like I was some junkie that needed to be watched, or I was going to attack them, or it was super interesting. Some people have asked me like, hey, did you feel, you know, afraid of getting robbed or getting attacked? And definitely, yeah, for sure. Especially in the beginning, I'd never done this before. I didn't know what the protocol was. I didn't want to take someone else's sleeping spot who was already sleeping out in the street. I didn't want to run into them in the night. But my actual experience was that all of the people were more afraid of me than I was of them. People would look at me as this person lying in the street and kind of give me this wide berth walk around. And it was a strange shift of perspective that I don't think I'm ever going to forget in my life. But the reality was that it was actually in some ways freeing, because I had nothing to steal other than this old shitty laptop and I guess my passport. But I was more afraid of the cops coming in the middle of the night to try and move me on from where I was sleeping, and had to find another spot. So that morning I spent my last handful of coins that I made busking on a coffee, and I took myself to the library in Split to have a shower in the bathroom, and sat down and I opened up my journal, and that's when I had an intervention with myself. I still remember so clearly what I wrote to this day, and it went something like this. Time's up, buddy. You've left on this big fucking mission to find yourself and to, you know, have this beautiful moment of, you travel around the world and you learn all this stuff about yourself, and you have this beautiful moment of aha realization. And here it is. That aha moment is not coming. You have kicked the can down the road so far that you're literally fucking homeless, still waiting for some realization to come to you, some, crumpled piece of paper to, be blown along the roadside, and you step on it and you pick it up and like, this is what I do with my life. Wow. That fucking movie moment is not gonna happen. And so the worst thing that you could do is continue drifting, kicking the can down the road with no direction in your life. Because from this point here, it only gets way fucking worse. I heard people say that, some people said to me in response to this story, yeah, the beautiful thing about rock bottom is you can only go up. And in my experience, that's actually not true. And when I was sitting in that library and I was looking at my life and I looked into my future and I saw where it could go, when I looked back to 2016 and I knew where it could go, and what was fucking terrifying is I could see a life where I kept not taking responsibility and I kept drifting and I kept letting myself spiral. And I knew where that road would lead. And the only thing that was going to stop me from doing that was myself, was choosing. So I wrote, gun to your head right fucking now. If you had to make a decision based on what you already know about something that you wouldn't hate doing for the rest of your life, what would it be? And in some ways, the gun really was to my head. So I put pen to paper and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and it was fucking terrifying at the time because I felt like there was so much pressure, but there was. And that gun to my head exercise helped me find the thing that was actually under my nose the entire time. And the only reason I couldn't see it was because I was still fucking waiting for some other person to tell me or give me permission. And when I was in Sri Lanka, I left that hostel, that fucking crazy place that I first managed. And I ended up managing a surf camp in Sri Lanka. And the owner was this cool Swedish chick who's still my friend to this day, but she had essentially a mental breakdown. And she said, like, look, you basically have to fucking do everything. I can't handle it. She was going through a lot at the time, and she was like, I fucking can't handle this stuff. You have to do this. And so I ended up running the entire place. And one of the things that was involved in that was running this surf fitness class. And these people had come and paid hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars to stay for a few weeks to work on their surfing and get video analysis and surf lessons. And part of that package was this 3 times a week surf fitness class to help them move better in the surf. And I'd never fucking done any of this before, but I had trained for the last 10, 12 years. It would have been about 10 years at that time. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And I really did it. And I really put my mind to it. And I really wrote down a program and did it to the best of my ability. And I'd been on my own journey, fixing my own pain in my body and fucking, 9 different joints over the last, few years. And so I ended up being pretty good at it. And teaching felt natural to me. And I even had some physios coming through the surf camp that were like, hey bro, I learned a lot, thanks for the class. And I was like, oh, really? And at the time, I'd also been, just before I left on this year overseas, I'd also been going to these men's circles and these breathwork and ice bath things. This is back in 2017 before fucking literally every man and his dog was doing ice baths. And I was like, that's something else unique. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but it's something to do with that. Or at least I'm gonna make it something to do with that. And I knew there's this guy back in Melbourne who had this studio that did meditation and movement and ice bars, and I was like, I'm gonna go and ask that dude for a job, and just, even if I just fucking work for free, and that's what I'm gonna do. I didn't know if physical or mental health was my calling or my purpose. And as a fucking 24, 25-year-old, undernourished, sleeping in the street, I wasn't exactly the picture of mental health or physical health. But I could see a future in which I would wake up every morning to do something like that for work, and I didn't hate it. And I thought that maybe it was in alignment with something that I felt like I would enjoy and I was naturally had some ability at. And that was most importantly enough for me to take the first step. And as soon as I made that decision in my mind, I felt something that I had not felt for the longest time, if ever. And that was hope for the future. To this day, I am stunned by how instant the perception shift was for me. Because up until that point, I had nothing to go back home for. It made a strange kind of sense for me to keep sleeping in the street and keep, eking by this miserable existence. But as soon as I made this decision about what my mission was, as soon as I had this mission, it didn't make sense for me to keep doing that. And all of a sudden, I had something to work towards. And I knew I had to go make some money to fuel the study that I was going to do and to get the education that I wanted. And so I called home and I called my mum and I told her absolutely fucking nothing about what had been happening. But I was like, hey, I have this thing I want to do. I want to come home and do this. Can you please loan me some money to help me get a flight? Because I can't afford it. And I want to say that I am incredibly grateful not only for my mum in that moment saying yes, but just for the ability to actually do that. Because so many people who are sleeping in the street don't have anyone that they can call and ask for help. And so I don't pretend to understand what it's like to be in that position or to be a certified actual homeless person. That's not what I went through. And also I will say that until that moment, that genuinely did not feel like an option for me. Because going back to a life without that mission or that meaning felt like a death sentence to me. As soon as I got home, I got 2 jobs and I volunteered as a cleaner in that movement and meditation studio, cleaning bathrooms and cleaning the gym just so I could be around the space and learn. And over the next 5 years, I worked harder than I ever had in my entire life. I was always someone that people in my life would tell me that I could never stick to anything and I needed to work harder. And this mission transformed everything. And I spent over $50,000 on self and business development. And that's at a time where I did not have that money. I was funneling everything I made back into just developing myself. And I fell in a heap more times than I can count. And somehow I still managed to find some way to keep going. And I'm telling you this story for one reason. And it's because I'm telling you this story from a place that in my life that I never thought I'd be. I'm recording this from Vanuatu, where I've been living in front of the ocean for the last 4 months. Over the last year, I've been to 19 different cities and islands in 6 different countries and traveled around and teaching and working and teaching workshops the whole time. And that started out as what felt like a pipe dream. Back in later 2016 when I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do that though. That doesn't seem realistic. And every single step on that journey from there to here felt absolutely nothing like the shit I read in the self-help books. When people neatly wrap their life into a story, you can get the impression that every next step made sense for them. But that's not how it felt for me. Every single step, I felt confused and petrified that maybe I was doing the fucking wrong thing or I was arrogant or delusional for setting such big goals. Every video I would post, even in the making and telling of this story, I had parts of myself that was so resistant to what are people gonna think? Am I just fucking arrogant and, delusional for thinking that people are gonna wanna hear this? And it never felt like I thought it was gonna feel. It never felt like the stories that I read. In many ways I was wrong, about that purpose that I found in Croatia. I don't teach breath work. I don't teach ice baths or anything like that. I'm not a Wim Hof instructor that I thought I was gonna be. Steve Jobs said in that famous Stanford commencement speech that, it's only when you look back that you can connect the dots. And that's true. And that's a great speech. But if that is true, then how the fuck do you find the courage and the grit to keep on going in those times where you have no fucking idea what it is that you're actually doing or where it is that you're really going? And maybe you feel like you're full of shit and there's no hope. So whether I was suicidally depressed or sleeping in the street or getting dumped or, afraid of not being worthy of the success that I really wanted, or getting the success that I really wanted and figuring out that, hey, actually it feels kind of just a bit empty and I'm just doing the same fucking thing I'm doing anyway. All of those experiences had one thing in common, and it's this: they brought me face to face with my demons. All those repressed aspects of my psyche that is swimming around underneath the surface that honestly I was too afraid to face, that I was trying to use these achievements and these big goals and the women and the travel to prove something to myself that I was underneath very afraid that I was not. And in that last 5 years and even longer, or, essentially 80% of the stuff that I've done helped me understand those issues intellectually. But in practice, I still felt powerless to change them. But I've also found the 20% of tools and methods and systems that I can practically use in the moments that I feel like a fucking fraud, or that I feel like, I'm just not worthy of the success or the love that I truly desire for myself, or of anything that I was honestly too afraid to admit that I really want. And that 20% changed my fucking life. Because I used to feel like I was trapped in this cycle, that I was doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again, because that's what I did for fucking 25 years, even longer, 27 years. And I would feel like every achievement or every up or every high or every happy moment was just the top of the same cycle that was inevitably going to be taking me back down into the fucking pits. And there was nothing I could do about that. And that is no longer true for me. Because of that 20%, that doesn't happen anymore. And I've been tested over and over and over again with some of the hardest fucking experiences of my life in this last 3 years, and I've never gone back to that place, those depths where I was before. And over the last 2 years, I've also been teaching this 20%. It started out small. People in my life noticing a change in me and being like, dude, what the fuck happened? What did you do? And I started sharing with those people, and then more people started asking, and I started working with people in a more formal capacity, and it's kind of grown from there. And as it grew, I found myself spending less time teaching the handstands and muscle-ups that I was used to teaching, and teaching more and more inner work. And eventually I found that the people who were working with me in the physical capacity anyway were all doing it for the fucking same reason. And it's for their mental health. And what I've realized is that working on your physical health without your mental health is just as pointless as trying to work on your mental health without having a strong physical foundation to stand on. You're fighting your own physiology, and you don't eat well, and you don't fucking sleep well, and we have to align the physical and the mental. And that's the whole reason that I'm telling you this story. Because when I taught this stuff that I was working with the people in the physical capacity, it changed their fucking lives. And they finally felt worthy and ready and consistent and disciplined enough to lose the 30 kilos that they've been struggling to lose, or to get out of the pain that they kept putting themselves in by beating the fuck out of themselves in the gym because they didn't feel like they were worthy enough and they didn't feel like they were big enough. And so this training was fueled with this self-inflicted sabotage. It helped them actually get into the relationship that they finally wanted and finally communicate in a more powerful way and actually set boundaries in their relationship for the first time. And each of them started having the experience of having their friends and their family being like, dude, what did you do? And that's why I feel like this is something I can't stay silent on anymore. I want to share the inner work tools that have worked for me to help me change my own life and help other people change their lives. And it's not a fucking silver bullet. It's not a panacea. I'm not enlightened. I'm still using these tools actively work on shit in my life that I still need to very much work on. Hard things still feel hard. Rejection and fear of failure and uncertainty all still feel scary. But the difference for me now is that those fears no longer control my actions. And that's still fucking wild to me, because that was the that was the truth for me for the longest time, most of my life. So there's nothing in the world that I feel more passionately about than sharing these tools with you. And if you've supported me this far, or if you're watching this right now, purely by watching this, you are supporting me. And so I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because without all of the people that I've worked with and the people that I have supported, I would never be able to get here to this point where I can actually tell you this story. And especially to the people that trusted in me in the early days when I was still finding my feet. Thank you. And I also want to give back to you. So if you resonated with any of this story, if you've been through any of the things that I've been through, if you feel similarly trapped by the ability to intellectually define in perfect clarity all of the things that you feel like are fucking going crazy in your minds, you still feel powerless to change any of them, then I want to hear from you. Send me a DM, drop me a comment below, send me a fucking email, I do not mind. In fact, I really want to hear from you because I'm building a library of resources of the tools that help me make actual change in the moments that mattered. And I would love to give those to you for free. And your input will help me shape those resources as well as the articles and the videos that I'll be releasing weekly from here on out. So thank you for watching this far. And if nothing else, I hope that this video is giving you some hope. I'll see you in the next one.